6 months ago, a man I had trusted for over a decade sat across from me at a dinner table, smiled, and told our closest friends a lie about me, so smooth I almost believed it myself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't correct him. I just watched his mouth move, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing. That silence was the moment the old version of me stopped existing. Stay with me until the end of this video, because I'm going to walk you through the exact 6-stage shift that turned that moment from a wound into the most useful tool I own. Stage 6 is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the only reason the other 5 actually last. Most people build stages 1 through 5, feel strong for a few months, and then quietly collapse back into who they were before. If you leave before you understand why, you'll rebuild the exact same walls that keep getting broken. Here is the part nobody warns you about. Being good costs something. Every time you forgive quickly, explain patiently, and give people the benefit of the doubt, you are paying a tax. Not a moral tax, a practical one. People do not read your patience as virtue. Most of them read it as availability. And availability, once discovered, gets used. Not always with cruelty. Sometimes it's just laziness. It is simply easier to keep taking from the person who never says stop. I want to give you a second example because I think you already have one of your own running in the back of your mind. A friend of mine spent 4 years covering for a business partner who kept missing deadlines, kept apologizing, kept promising it was the last time. It never was. It wasn't until she stopped accepting the apology as payment and started asking for the actual outcome instead that anything changed. The apology had been doing the partner's work for him the entire time. The moment it stopped working as currency, the behavior stopped too, almost overnight. This is not cynicism. It's a pattern you can verify in your own life if you're willing to be honest for the next 30 seconds. Think of the last time someone crossed a real line with you. Did they stop because they respected you? Or because they were afraid of what would happen if they kept going? If you actually sit with that question, you already know the answer, and for most of us, it's the second one. People rarely change their behavior because you're understanding. They change at the moment understanding stops being guaranteed. It shows up in families the same way it shows up everywhere else. The sibling who always picks up the phone at 2 a.m. becomes the one everyone calls first and thanks last. Not because the family is cruel, because the pattern was never interrupted. Nobody had a reason to change what kept working for them. This is the machinery underneath almost every relationship where you feel unseen. It has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with predictability. A person who reacts the same forgiving way every single time, no matter what is done to them, becomes safe to mistreat. Not because anyone sits down and plots it, because the human mind is efficient, and efficiency treats consistent softness as an open door. Machiavelli wrote something 500 years ago that explains this better than any modern psychology book. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but very few ever experience what you actually are. Most people never test what you actually are because you never once make them. So here's the real question, and I want you to actually answer it in your head before we go further. Are you still running the version of yourself that explains, apologizes, and waits patiently to be understood? Or are you finally ready to build the version that doesn't need to be? Because those are two different people, and only one of them stops getting hurt the same way twice. That rebuild starts with stage 1, the wall. Not a wall to keep everyone out, a wall that decides who gets close and on what terms. Most people think boundaries are about saying no more often. They're actually about removing the guesswork. When you're vague about what you will and won't tolerate, people aren't always being cruel when they cross the line. Sometimes they're guessing, and they guessed wrong because you never once told them where the line was. A boundary that's stated calmly one time and then enforced without a lengthy apology attached to it protects your peace more than 100 arguments ever will. The moment you stop debating your own limits out loud and simply hold them in silence, something in the dynamic shifts. People stop testing you. Not because they suddenly respect you more, but because testing you stops producing the result they wanted. Picture it in real life. Someone consistently shows up late with no explanation. The old version of you laughs it off, says it's fine, and quietly resents it for a week. The stage 1 version says, calmly, once, I'll wait 15 minutes next time. After that, I'm gone. No lecture, no follow-up speech, just a line and the willingness to actually hold it. Now, picture the same shift at work. A colleague keeps handing you their unfinished tasks with a smile and you're just better at this than me. The old version takes it as a compliment and stays late fixing it. The stage 1 version says, once, I can help you learn this, but I'm not finishing it for you again, and then actually leaves at 5. That's the entire skill, not anger, precision. Before we go further, I know what some of you are already thinking, because I thought it too the first time I heard something like this. Doesn't this just turn me into the version of the people who hurt me? It's a fair question, and the answer is the whole reason stage 6 exists later in this video. There's a difference between protecting yourself and using someone. Protection has a limit. It stops the moment you're safe. Using someone has no limit because it's never actually about safety. It's about extraction. Everything I'm walking you through has a ceiling built into it. The moment you're no longer being harmed, the wall comes down enough to let good people back in. That's not what the people who hurt you were doing. Keep that distinction in your pocket, because it matters more than anything else in this video. Stage 2 is harder because it goes against almost everything you've been taught about honesty. Silence. Not silence as punishment, and not the cold, sulking kind. Silence as information control. Every time you over-explain yourself in the middle of a conflict, you're handing the other person a manual for how to manage you. You're telling them exactly which words make you defensive, which ones make you cave, which ones will send you chasing an explanation you were never going to get anyway. Machiavelli's advice here was blunt. Never reveal the whole of your thinking, because clarity is what makes you predictable, and predictable is what makes you controllable. You don't owe every person a window into your reasoning. You especially don't owe it to someone who has already shown you they'll use that window against you later. Say less. Let people sit in not knowing. Most conflicts don't actually need your commentary. They need your absence from the noise. If that landed, drop the word silence in the comments right now, because stage 3 is where most people quietly give up, and I want to know who's still with me. Stage 3, detachment from outcomes you cannot control. You cannot control whether someone values you correctly. You cannot control whether they apologize, whether they grow, whether they ever fully see what they did. Chasing any of those outcomes is like arguing with the weather and getting angry when it doesn't listen. The only thing that was ever inside your control is whether you stay in the room. Detachment isn't coldness dressed up as growth. It's refusing to let your peace depend on someone else's choices. The strongest move available to you in a relationship that keeps disappointing you is not fighting harder for it. It's quietly, without announcement, no longer needing it to work, and letting that person meet a version of you that doesn't require their approval to feel whole. This is the part where people usually misunderstand the whole philosophy. So let me be precise about the line between the two. Coldness withdraws to punish someone, and it wants them to notice the withdrawal and suffer from it. Detachment withdraws to protect your own peace, and it genuinely does not need them to notice at all. If part of you is hoping they'll see you've pulled away and come chasing after you, that's not detachment yet. That's still attachment wearing a disguise. Real detachment feels almost quiet and undramatic from the inside, because it isn't performing anything for anyone. There's a very old idea that people are moved either by love or by fear, and if you can master which one moves you, nothing external can move you against your will anymore. That's not about controlling other people. That's about controlling the one lever they've had over you this entire time, your need for the outcome to go a certain way. Stage 4 is where pain gets repurposed. Most people treat pain as proof that something is wrong with them. Flip that assumption completely. Every betrayal you've survived taught you something true about a person that you would never have learned any other way. Every disappointment showed you exactly where your standards were quietly too low. That's not a tragedy you carry forward. That's data you get to use. Machiavelli said a wise man learns more from a single crisis than from years of comfort. And he was right for a reason that has nothing to do with 16th century politics. Comfort never asks you to change anything, and pain always does. The people who come out of hard seasons sharper aren't the ones who felt the pain less. They're the ones who studied exactly what it was showing them, instead of only mourning what it cost them. Here's a pattern erupt for you, because I want this one to actually stick. Next time something breaks your heart, I want you to ask one specific question before you ask, why me? Ask, what is this now? Let me see clearly that I couldn't see before. That single reframe is the difference between carrying a wound for 10 years and closing it in 10 weeks. I've watched people apply this to a divorce and come out with a clearer sense of what they actually need in a partner than they had in the 15 years leading up to it. The pain didn't get smaller. Their use of it got sharper. We're a little over 2/3 through this video, and I want to be honest with you about something. Everything up to this point, the wall, the silence, the detachment, the reframed pain, is what most videos on this topic stop at. It's the part that gets clipped into quotes and looks powerful on a thumbnail. But I've watched people build all 4 of those and still end up exhausted and hollow a year later, because there are 2 pieces left, and they're the ones that actually make it hold. Stage 5 is the one that quietly holds the first 4 together, one non-negotiable standard. Not 10 new rules, not a complete personality overhaul. One single line you will not cross for anyone, regardless of how much you like them, need them, or miss who they used to be. Maybe it's honesty. Maybe it's how you're spoken to in front of other people. Maybe it's simply that effort has to be mutual, not performed by only one of you. Pick the one that matters most and make it completely unconditional. A single standard held without exception rebuilds your self-respect faster than 100 half-enforced ones ever will. Because the people around you learn there is a floor now, and a floor is the only thing that stops you from falling indefinitely. I watched someone apply just this one stage to dating after years of accepting inconsistency because the chemistry was good. Her standard was simple. If plans get canceled twice in a row without a real reason, she doesn't make a third one. No speech, no ultimatum delivered with tears, just a quiet, consistent floor. Within a year, she said the quality of who stayed in her life changed more than it had in the previous decade, and the standard itself never got more complicated than that one sentence. And now, stage 6. The one almost nobody talks about because it doesn't look impressive from the outside and it doesn't fit neatly into 8 minutes of highlight reel advice. After the boundaries, the silence, the detachment, the reframed pain, and the one standard you refuse to break, the final shift is this. You stop performing strength for an audience and you start actually respecting yourself in private when no one is watching and no one would ever know the difference either way. This is the stage that makes the other 5 permanent, because boundaries you only hold when people are watching were never really boundaries. They were a performance, and performances collapse the moment the audience leaves the room. Real self-respect is what you do when there's no one left to impress and no story to tell about it afterward. It's choosing not to check what you told yourself you wouldn't check at midnight when nobody would ever find out either way. It's holding the standard even when breaking it would be completely private and painless. That is the actual difference between someone who merely looks unshakable on camera and someone who genuinely is alone in the room with no one watching. This is also the stage that quietly protects you from becoming the very thing you were trying to escape. Anyone can perform boundaries for an audience. Anyone can look detached in a group chat. But the version of you that holds the line when it costs something and no one will ever know it happened, that version isn't performing power. It simply has it, the same way a person who has already survived a fire stops being afraid of matches. That's what happened at that dinner table. I didn't need him to admit what he did. I didn't need an apology, and I didn't need the room to quietly take my side. I already knew exactly who I was in a way that no longer depended on his version of the story ever changing. That is the entire point of everything you just heard. Not becoming cold, not becoming someone who uses people the exact way you were once used. Becoming someone whose peace no longer requires anyone else's permission to exist. If this gave you something real, tell me which stage you're actually on right now in the comments below. Subscribe if you want the rest of this framework in the videos coming next. And remember this on your way out. You are not building walls to keep the world out. You are building the one version of yourself that the old one could never have survived becoming.